one leaves school and goes into the world of work, it is very seldom that one actually is prepared for what to do with your money. People just assume you start work and you'll know what to do. But very few people know how to save their money, how to spend their money, and how to plan for their future. It often happens that even later on in life, you wake up one day and you realize, oh my goodness, I didn't know what I should do. I have completely mismanaged my money. Now here today to discuss this topic with us is Sam Beckbessinger, who wrote this book, Manage Your Money Like an Effing Grown-Up. The best way, money advice you never got. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jill.
So tell me, the book is aimed at the younger market. Tell me why.
So when I came out of school, right, I'd done really well at school. I'd learned lots about maths. I'd learned about English and Shakespeare and all of these really unhelpful things. What I never had to do was I never had to pass a test like I had to do with my driver's license before I could take a credit card out for a drive. No one ever teaches us when we're young these things. And so what happened to me is what happens to a lot of young people, which is that I got to my mid-20s and I was deep down a debt spiral. Because I just hadn't learned the basics about, as you said, planning, managing, knowing what I was supposed to do with my money. So I really wrote this book and really went on this whole mission to learn how money works and share that with the world, because I was that person. And I'm still hoping that I can send this back in a time machine, back to 25-year-old me, and be like, it's okay, it's not that complicated, don't worry, here's the guide, here's the book that you wish that they'd handed you when you finished matric.
I think quite a few people who would pick up this book would think already, why am I picking up this book is because I'm in trouble with my money.
Sure.
I remember when I was at university, I had no idea how to save or spend my money, and I could just write out checks. In those days we had checkbooks.
Well,
so I just wrote out checks,
Yeah.
and I didn't think about the consequences of that. Now once you encounter those consequences, how do you deal with them?
Yeah, so a lot of what I've done over the last nearly 10 years has involved interviewing people all around Africa, all around the country, all around the world. And you certainly are not alone in this. Like this happens to so many people who find themselves in trouble. In South Africa, I think the number is that there are 10 million people with an impaired credit record. It happens all the time. I think particularly in this country, we know that we have a debt emergency. We're not saving enough, but even before then, so many of us are borrowing more money than we'll ever be able to pay back, because it looks like such easy money when they offer it to us. And then months or years down the line, we might end up in the point where 50-60% of our paycheck is just going to pay for debts. And it means we can never move forward. And I think the really encouraging thing about when you get to this point is that there are actually a lot of really good options for South Africans who are in trouble with debt. There's debt counseling. The book talks about how to deal with that. It also talks about some really simple strategies for just prioritizing your debts, figuring out what to pay back. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. You're not alone if you're in this position. Just realizing that you want to change and you want to get out of this situation already means that you're ahead of most people. You just have to take that first step, I guess. Firstly, just learn a little bit about how money works to begin with. I think the fact that so many people don't really understand things like compound interest and how powerful that can be is why we get suckered into not understanding the debts and the loans that are offered to us. You know, we look at the price of a car, for instance, and the car advertisers in South Africa are very good at making this very hot, sexy car look very affordable, because you put in a balloon payment and then you kind of stretch it out over the maximum period. And you look at the monthly payment as a young person and you're like, yes, I get the car of my dreams, I can just afford it, awesome. But what you don't understand is what that car is actually going to cost you over the whole lifetime of the loan and what you could do with that money instead. So I think firstly, just taking the step to really learn, understand some basic principles of compound interest and see how the compound interest can be working for you, not just against you. I think that's really the first trick. Figure out the rules of money, because it turns out it's not actually that complicated. You need to know how compound interest works, how to diversify, and what assets are. That's it.
Then if we look at another big investment that people look at making is buying a house.
Yeah.
Is that a good idea?
I think for a lot of people, buying a house is not a financial decision, it's an emotional decision, it's a lifestyle decision. For a lot of South Africans, buying a house is just really emotionally important for us, and that's great, and then I think people definitely should do that. The book does talk about, though, the fact that buying a house tends to not be a very good investment strategy. It's certainly not a foolproof one. It's not a good idea to rely on buying a house as being the thing that's going to make you rich. It's a very risky investment. We talk about being safe as houses, but actually when you're consolidating all of your money and wealth into one huge thing, it means that only one thing has to go wrong and all of your wealth could vanish and disappear. So I talk a lot about some smart strategies to just diversify and not make your property your only big investment. So typically that means, unfortunately, buying on the lower end of our affordability range.
You also mention in your book the long distance commute
Yeah.
that comes in. We buy a big house, and how it may be even better for you to buy a smaller place closer to your work.
Yeah, scientists have done a lot of research about this idea of the hedonic treadmill. It means that the more that we encounter something every day, we just get used to it, and the less impact it has on our happiness. So here's a funny thing, like when we're thinking about sensible spending and we're thinking, should I spend 10,000 Rand on a fancy new couch, or should I spend 10,000 Rand on a holiday somewhere? We think I'm going to be sensible and I'm going to spend money on the couch because I use that every day. But science would tell us that actually the thing that's going to make you happier over your lifetime long term is taking the holiday, because you very quickly get used to the couch and it has no more impact on your happiness. And homes are just that on a bigger scale. So it turns out, though, that having a long commute every day really does impact your happiness badly, right? We all know what it's like to sit in the traffic, and it's a nightmare. And it turns out that commutes are something that we never actually get used to. It never stops making us miserable being stuck in traffic. Whereas your beautiful big house is probably something you will enjoy very much for a short period of time, and very quickly it'll kind of just disappear into the background of your mind, because our brains are not rational. They're primate brains. So I think it's good to spend your money where it's going to make you the most happy and the most fulfilled. And that's probably on those big ambitious dreams that you have. So I like to talk about thinking about Ulysses, the myth of Ulysses, right? So Ulysses, when he was going to encounter temptation, rather than trying to resist the temptation, he just made it impossible for him to give into it, right? So in the myth of Ulysses, he's sailing past an island with tempting sirens, and what he does is he gets his crewmen to tie him to the mast because he knows he doesn't want to have to resist. So we have to do the same thing with our money. It's the simplest possible thing, but to actually just set up an automatic savings debit order that goes off the day you get paid, it means that that money never touches your account in the first place, and it means you don't have to have that willpower. Something else I like to do is I have 2 day-to-day bank accounts, actually. I have a second card, and I put stickers on it so I remember that's the fun one. And that's my like messing around money. And what's fun about that is at the beginning of the month, I put an amount of cash into that, and that's explicitly money that it's okay to spend on dumb things. I'm giving myself permission to spend that money, and in fact I should. So, and then what that means is that I don't have that moments of guilt or should I, every time I'm swiping my card. I have pre-allocated an amount of money that is just for frivolity. And that really helps me, and it means that I can make sure that my grown-up money is somewhere else, it's going to the important things, but I'm still not having this constant feeling of deprivation and like budgeting is so hard and I hate it.
How should you be doing your budgeting, and how often?
Okay, so I think firstly, the important thing is to find a system that can actually track how you're really spending your money. I think a lot of budgets fail because we rely on trying to remember what we spent our money on, and most of the time we're way off. Like we might think we spend, I don't know, 1,000 Rand a month on eating out every month, but if we actually go and track all of those transactions, it might be much more than that. So I used to be part of a team that worked on an app in South Africa called 24/7. It's free. There are some other apps as well that do something similar. What those apps do is they track your spending automatically, and they categorize stuff for you. They take away a lot of that homework so that you're working from real data. You're not just trying to remember, and you're not having the whole schlep of actually going through your transaction history, which no one is going to do, which means no one is ever going to, make a budget. I think budgets fail when they're not real, when they're they're not based on reality. So I think the first thing to do is actually just to get really honest with yourself about where your money is actually going before you try and change it. Before you draw up a new spreadsheet and you're like, from now on, I'm never eating out ever. I'm going to be so good. I'm only going to live with 2-minute noodles and salty cracks. Don't be like that. Just start off tracking your money and start with the real data and then build a budget from there. Think about that 1,000 Rand you could be saving every month, what that could compound to over a year, over 5 years, over 10 years if you invest it. That could be the difference between you getting to start the business you wanted to start or not. It could be the difference between that once in a lifetime trip or not.
So if we look at that 1,000 Rand a month that you put aside, where would be the best place, or what are the alternatives of getting your money to grow?
So I think it very much depends on where people are in their life. So at the very back of the book, I have a step-by-step sort of milestone map of what I think most people should do in what order. Everyone's life is a bit different though. So for instance, if you have very expensive debt, it's normally worth actually investing the money and getting rid of that debt faster before you start investing. Before you start investing in the stock markets and equities and something like that, I think it's important that people have an emergency fund, because that's the thing that will protect your investments. Because the book is very much aimed at young people, when we do talk about investing, I talk a lot about passive ETFs because they're so simple. They're high risk, which is what we want when we're young. We want to actually take the most risk that we can, which seems very counterintuitive when you tell young people. You're like, you want to put your money somewhere risky, high risk. They're like, no, lose everything. Let me put it somewhere safe like the bank. And actually that's the least safe place to put it, because inflation will just make that money mean less and less and less over time. I talk in the book as well about the importance of diversifying internationally, how easy it is these days to open a global investment. You can do it online in 5 minutes for 250 Rand a month. We think of investing as this thing that's really inaccessible, but it's actually so easy to get started and really fun, because you suddenly are no longer thinking about saving money and you're not thinking about like, getting out of debt. You're suddenly thinking about, I'm investing, I'm building this like wealth, this possibility money, and that's where life gets pretty exciting.
Talking about possibilities, you took time off to write your book. Mm-hmm. How did you plan for that?
My big thing with myself is I know that there are some things that I really like spending money on, and I don't try and stop myself spending money frivolously there. I save money on the big things, the big three: your car, your house, or transportation, home, and food. And if you can save quite a lot of money on those three things, you'll be amazed how much of your paycheck you can put one side. So I was planning to write a book. I didn't know it was going to be this one. I thought it could be this one or some terrible horror thing. I knew that no one makes money by writing books. You just have to do it because you love it. And I've known that for years. So for the last few years, this has been my big goal, my big dream. This is the thing that I've been sacrificing every month for. And the funny thing is, none of it has really felt like a sacrifice. I've had a great last few years, and writing this book was so much fun. I actually was traveling while I was doing it as well, because it turns out you can live pretty cheaply somewhere else as well. So I think you just need that thing to motivate you. This was one of my things.
Thank you so much for talking to us. So if you feel uncertain about what to do with your money and how to cope with your debts, this book will help you manage your money like an effing grown-up. The best money advice you never got.